Seagal's name, you could just attack Aikido. Aikido is a shit martial art. It's not effective. It's not very good. And then by extension, you're making Steven Seagal look bad. And this is one of their favorite tactics to do to Hancock. They will attack. This idea is racist. It's inherently bullshit. They don't have to mention Hancock's name. Now it's just they just glue the two. They're so insidious this way.
Yeah, and they connect the connecting Hancock to white supremacy and aliens is the dumbest one. Because first of all, he never said nothing about aliens. Not only that, not only does he not think of it as white people built this stuff, he thinks it's the people that live there. But they lived there a long ass time ago. It's the same fucking people. It's Africans. Yeah. Whoever built the pyramids, they were Africans. Like, I'm an American.
Yeah. You know, like, let me just remind the audience.
That's where they lived.
Egypt is in Africa.
Yeah. In case you're wondering. Yeah, that is Northern Africa, and it's the most sophisticated construction we have ever witnessed on the face of the earth. Yeah. Anybody that disagrees, you need to really study what they accomplished just in the Great Pyramid. It's mind-boggling precision. It's not just the incredible feat of moving massive stones hundreds of miles through the mountains. It's the mind-boggling precision of the construction of these buildings that it's so crazy. It's almost like they made it so nutty that even if everything dissolved and expired, it would give us at least some clue that maybe something happened. Maybe people had achieved a level of sophistication. And my thought is, and this is just a guess, is that as we move towards metal and we move towards using different kinds of combustion engines and electronics, we moved in a very specific area of technology. And we were allowed to do this because things have been relatively peaceful for a couple hundred years. Okay? Relatively peaceful. And also, there's war in other places, so it's allowed us to spend our time here devising ways to fuck up people over there. That's the Manhattan Project, right? But if you have a completely different avenue that thinking goes in and innovation goes in, and instead of combustion engines and electronics, you have something that we haven't even considered. And that, to me, seems like what Egypt is. It seems to me that they had this incredibly fertile area. So if people look at Egypt now, you're looking at all the sand and all the shit. That is not what it looked like. In the thousands of years before the construction of the pyramid, it was a rainforest, and it was fertile. And so my thought is these people probably had plenty of food. Yeah. And so they didn't have to go anywhere. And so they weren't attacked that often. The Nubians conquered them, and that's when the statues started changing, looking more Southern African. But you have these people that live in this incredibly resource-rich place, and they were able to spend thousands of years there. And I think in those thousands of years, they devised methods that we still haven't even considered because we went in a different path, and we can't consider any other path. We consider our path, and we say, well, we're the furthest. We live today. Okay, so those fuckers in the past, they're basically cave people, right? That's how we look at it.
They look at them like dumb people playing with stones. Oh, they're silly. Yeah, they use stones because they weren't smart enough to use metal. It's like, when you look at the details of stone, it's like, you could say it's more impressive.
Well, we wanted to talk about Göbekli Tepe. Göbekli Tepe is not just fascinating in its construction, but also the timeline. Because the timeline fucked everything. I remember when Graham Hancock and Zawi Hawass were big, that other guy who's an archaeologist, the American guy's very smug. But he's like, what evidence do you have of a civilization that lived 10,000 years ago? Well, you have one now. Yeah. So you have to shut the fuck up because you were wrong. So in the 1990s, a sheep herder finds a stone. He starts kicking it and moving it around, and he realizes, wow, this is a big-ass stone. I thought bring in some smart dudes, figure this out, and they start digging, and they go, oh, Jesus, this is these huge circles of giant stone columns with 3D carved animals on them at a time that we thought people were living in teepees, right? We thought people had stone tools. We didn't think there was any metal.
We thought it had to be done the opposite way around. We thought you needed to be a hunter-gatherer, a farmer, and now they had to flip the entire shit on its ear. Well, actually, maybe.
I think think they only flipped that shit on its ear to try to make it look like they were right about the timeline of hunter-gatherers.
I completely agree.
And to ignore the possibility of an ancient civilization before Mesopotamia.
I completely agree.
Because it's the only thing that makes sense. There's no way when you're just struggling to find food, okay? And if you ever go on a fishing trip or a hunting trip, it's fucking hard to get food. When we have modern stuff, it's hard to get food with a rifle, right? So these people were getting food, and they somehow or another in between them, while like running around trying to shoot rabbits with a bow and arrow, they figured out how to make these massive stone columns and put them in position and move them in circles and
hundreds of them. Pretty great artists too, doing some relief carvings. I mean, that's not the same as just
not
carving
only that, but
in.
animals that weren't local to the area, which is like, what? How do you even fucking know this is a thing? What is this?
So Göbekli Tepe, brother, if there is such a thing as an ancient conspiracy theory, it's this. So I remember hearing Graham Hancock come on your show back in like 2015 or 2017, and he was talking about Göbekli Tepe. And at that time, he had shared that the site was only approximately 5% excavated. It's the first video on my channel. It's like August 2017, and I shared the details of it. These pillars dates back 11,600 years. It appears to be purposely buried at the same time of the Unfortunate Climate Catastrophe. This is fascinating. And, excavations were continuing. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to backburn this topic of Göbekli Tepe for a little while, let them further their excavations, and I'll revisit this later when there's something new to share. So earlier this summer, I'm like, all right, let me revisit Göbekli Tepe and see what's new there. And I was astonished to learn that 5% figure was still the same. Have you heard this?
Yeah, I've watched your videos on it.
YouTube channel, Bright Insight. Subscribe.
Undeniably strange. Your videos are undeniably strange. So here's some images where you can see what it kind of looks like, along with this Global Heritage Fund.org story on it. So it shows 5%.
Right. And that figure is still the same as of 2023. Yeah. I had partnered one. There's a lady who does tours there and corroborate the 5% figure, and then there's a gentleman named Hugh Newman, who's an author and also leads tours. And he communicated with me that what they were going to do, and I couldn't believe this, they're going to defer a full-scale excavation for, quote, future generations with a 150-year estimated time frame for a full excavation of Göbekli Tepe. And I'm like, wait a second. Are you serious? Like, this makes no sense. We're talking about arguably not just the world's oldest ancient site, but arguably the most mysterious, because it's like you're saying, it's not supposed to exist. Based on everything we were taught in school, it's supposed to be the Sumerians. And then you have the site of Göbekli Tepe, made up of sophisticated pillars and concentric circles.
At least 5,000 years older.
Yeah, older than, almost 7,000 years older than Stonehenge. And Stonehenge is a mystery of itself. So I start Googling, looking into the details. I'm like, this doesn't make any sense. How could there possibly be, how could they defer excavations for future generations when this may be the most important ancient site on Earth involving our mysterious lost ancient past? And so I started digging into this, and I couldn't believe what I found. So they were doing large-scale excavations, but that has since ceased. Just to clarify, they are still excavating Göbekli Tepe, but they have rolled and dialed back the large-scale excavations of the years prior, and they are focusing on conservation and tourism management of the site. And like I said, with a 150-year time frame, and I'm like, wait a second. I can't, and I have all the screenshots in that folder.
Because of funding?
Absolutely not. So not only have they never claimed that it's related to funding, but this is where things get bizarre, is that there's a Turkish conglomerate called the Doges Group, which consists of 250 companies within Turkey. It's $1 billion industry. And they're the ones that took over management and funding of the site back in 2017. And they announced this at all places, the World Economic Forum meeting in Davos. In 2016 is when they announced this partnership. Initial funding of $15 million. At that time, they set up the infrastructure for tourism. Roads, sidewalks, walkways, roofing platforms. And since then is when they dialed back the excavations. And I'm like, this makes absolutely no sense. So it has, let me just be crystal clear here. It has nothing to do with funding, and they've never claimed it has anything to do with funding. But their excuses, they have said, one of which is that, well, we want to wait for future technologies to develop so we can more safely excavate the site. And I'm like, wait a second, hold on a second. we're talking about pillars buried in dirt. It's 2024. Do not tell me that we do not have the technological capability to dig rocks up.
What would be an alternative explanation?
So, okay, this is where things get fun. So,
rabbit hole. Here we go.
Fun. I love a good rabbit hole.
Let me say a couple things before I get into it. One of which is that them saying that they're waiting for a future technology to develop to safely excavate the site. I'm like, what type of magical shovel or pressure water hose are we talking about here? Right. And since they're saying that they're continuing to excavate the site today, since they're saying they continue to excavate the site today, I'm like, well, which is it? Are you saying that you're doing so in unsafe methods? And I already know that's not the answer, because there's been no issue with destructing the site from digging it up. It's not like they broke a pillar and like, oh dang, wait a second, we need to walk this back. We're not doing things safely. Right. That's not the case here. So there are a few explanations here.
Okay, here's what I want to hear.
So one of which is that the most logical explanation, this is the less conspiratorial one, which is that it has to do with money. You have this Turkish conglomerate of people that are saturated with members of the World Economic Forum. For example, the CEO of the Doges Group is a longtime member of the World Economic Forum. Let me backburn the World Economic Forum for a half a second. They're business people. They took over the site, and it's all about money now. Back in 2019, Göbekli Tepe had approximately 19,000 visitors yearly. Now it's at 500,000. Their focus, if nothing else, they're just trying to bring revenue in. It's all about money. Yeah, they don't care about excavating the rest of the site.
15 more million, it's not going to bring 15 more million in revenue.
Right. And they just want their money back. Okay.
Right. Okay.
But I'm like, well,
that makes sense.
It does make sense.
To weigh in on that real quick, it also, the mystery plays, that site is probably the second most popular place on the planet with people like ourselves. And the more mystery is there, the more money, it's the more like, we deal in mystery. So if they excavate everything and we know everything there is about that site and it's all super mundane and there's nothing cool about it anymore, that tit dries up and there's no milk.
Yeah, but how could it ever stop being cool?
I agree. I agree with that. But
that one doesn't make any sense.
That's a Zahi Hawass kind of thing. He's of the same opinion where I think a lot of the same things, happen in Egypt for the same reason. Zahi Hawass is quoted as saying that those New Age people, it doesn't matter what happens in Egypt, the New Age people, they come. It's about tourism. Ever since the Arab Spring, tourism in Egypt's been lower. So I think a lot of the same, we're going to talk in a minute about the hidden chamber in the pyramid that they located and still haven't excavated for whatever fucking reason. I think that might be part of it. If you want to get super mundane and not conspiratorial, it's just a simple. The tourists keep coming while there's a mystery there. As soon as we open that up, it's just an empty chamber.
I don't buy that.
Me either.
The mystery of the structures themselves that are completely excavated is just so fascinating.
So let me be clear on Göbekli Tepe. It's somewhere between 5 and 10% excavated. Which means that
here's some archaeological sites where only 10% or less have been uncovered.
None of which date back anywhere near remotely as old as Göbekli Tepe. And so just to put this into perspective, Göbekli Tepe, according to ground penetrating radar, consists of approximately 200 T-shaped pillars. Only 72 of them have been unearthed. And as of just a few years ago, they're dialing that back to fully excavate them, which again, the 150-year time frame. And I'm like, this is entirely unacceptable. There could be hidden answers about our lost ancient past waiting to be discovered on these pillars, because all the pillars are trying to tell us some sort of story. All the depictions, animals, all kinds of things on there.
There's the shaman with the bag.
Right, which is
very interesting.
Right, we've seen that from the Sumerians, we've seen it in South America.
The bag thing is very fascinating.
It is. It's hotly debated.
I'm sure. I don't mean, you could say maybe it's a tool bag, you could say maybe it's psychedelics it's got in that bag.
Academics say it's a water bucket.
You guys familiar with
there you go.
You guys familiar with the work of Martin Sweat?
Yeah.
No.
He's the one that he was on Ancient Apocalypse season 1 for a minute. He's the guy who basically a star map of that pillar 43, and in his opinion, those 3 handbags at the top were 3 sunrises. And if that's the case, that would almost make sense, because then like a picture of an Assyrian holding that would be like a holding of astronomical knowledge. Like this symbol could have been a symbol of knowledge of astronomy, which is one thing, honestly, about Göbekli Tepe.
Could have been a book bag.
Could have been a book bag,
right? I mean, it kind of makes sense. They probably had to travel around with their books.
So here's the thing: that pillar, that's just one pillar out of 200. And here we are debating. We don't even know what it is. It's all conjecture.
Hold it up, James. Let's see what that pillar looks like.
So this Göbekli Tepe situation is far more bizarre than we've described so far.
I think the logical explanation, though, is that you have massive tourist revenue coming to see it as is. Why spend more money and excavate these things?
I think that's the most logical explanation, but it could be more insidious than that, because
that's one pillar.
That's pillar 43, the most debated one of them all, and there's approximately 128 more pillars that are still buried in the earth.
What's that bird doing holding the earth?
Dr. Martin Sweatman, his first paper on Göbekli Tepe's pillar 43, he's got Scorpio in the bottom. He believes that's Sagittarius, that's the sun, and that's one. Basically, it's a star map denoting the time that the comet smacked the earth. Is what he believes. Each one of those B's, his latest paper on it, each one of those B symbols is a day. Each one is his opinion. Each one of those boxes is a month. And there's basically a full year denoting the whole thing, the way he broke down. It's very interesting stuff. And one of the things that's wild to me, when we talk about like the lack of further excavations, is almost every pillar we bring up has new symbology, new symbols, new iconography. If we're trying to find some sort of ancient proto-language or something, we need more symbols. We need more things on Earth.
Sure.
Yeah.
And that's completely opposed by the mainstream archaeology. The idea that these guys had any sort of written language is fucking ridiculous.
But what are the theories involved in, I know it's been theorized that it was purposely covered.
It really looks like it. If you look at pictures of the excavation, it looks like it was all piled in with stones and dirt, because if it was some sort of natural event, it would have destroyed the pillars. The pillars are preserved. So it wasn't just blown in with dust. If you look at it, it's gravel, and like as Graham Hancock has explained, that Klaus Schmidt, the original excavator of the site before his untimely passing in 2014, the people that worked the site believed it was intentionally buried. That is debated in academia today.
But isn't there also carbon isotope dating of the ground soil that shows it's the same age throughout the entire whatever feet it is of the dirt?
Yes, and so it's very apparent that it was purposely buried. And what's interesting about that is that it coincides exactly with the Younger Dryas climate catastrophe. So if you want an alternative idea we could talk
mudslides.
No, because it would destroy those pillars. Yeah, I've seen that in Iraq with the statues. So let's talk about this in a second. This is where things get wild. So
that's before the excavation. This is an aerial photo from what year is this?
That should be 2004. Or excuse me, that would be before 1994. We started excavations in 1994 and 1995.
So that is when it was just dirt.
Correct.
Everybody thought it was just a regular hillside, which makes you wonder.
Well, they're finding dozens of other sites around Turkey that are even older. And
even older.
Yes. So let me tell you a few different things about Göbekli Tepe. When you bring up pictures of the pillars, notice how they all imitate animals on them.
Yeah.
Now, this is a fun topic, and I have a few other things to share. One of which is that if you want to talk about reasons not to excavate it, I'll give you two possibilities. And this is just conjecture. I don't know what the answer is. Let me say this up front. But part of it could have a religious implication as well as a climate change implication. Let me start with that. So we know it is an established fact that the Younger Dryas climate catastrophe happened between 12,800 and 11,600 years ago. We know that there was vast changes in weather patterns throughout the northern hemisphere. The only part of it that's debated, and as well as near extinction events, or extinction events of many different mammals in North America, what we know is that something happened. Whatever it is what's debated, whether it's a cosmic impact, whether it's a pole shift, whether it's sun cycles, all kinds of conjecture all the way around. But when I mentioned the WEF, they are some of the biggest proponents of the man-made climate change narrative. They're the ones that want to get rid of gas-powered stoves. They want us to get rid of vehicles. They are pushing their initiatives around the world, and they believe that we're destroying the planet. I'm not saying they're entirely wrong, but I don't agree with their ways of going about it, but that's a side point. But here's the thing. When you look at the legend of Noah's flood and Noah's Ark and the flood, so I'm not suggesting that there was a flood that covered every mountain on Earth, and nor am I suggesting that there was a boat that housed every species of animal on Earth. However, if Noah's Ark existed, Many believe that it was crashed onto Mount Ararat, which is also in Turkey. And something fascinating is that in the Bible, in Genesis 8:20, some of the first verses after Noah emerged from the flood, is that he was said to have constructed an altar to the Lord where he sacrificed some of every clean animal and some of every clean bird. Göbekli Tepe is in Turkey, and every single one of those pillars annotates animals. And some have suggested that it could be Noah's altar. Now, that could be one reason why they wouldn't want to excavate it, is because Turkey is an Islamic country, and if there was some Christian religious belief that was corroborated, they might not want that to happen. Another possibility is that the site itself might corroborate the Younger Dryas climate catastrophe. And when we're in a time frame where they don't like talking, academics, they don't like talking about cataclysms. They want to pretend they didn't happen. And they want everything to be man-made climate change. They don't ever talk about the Sahara being green 5,000 years ago, like when we talk about Egypt being the rainforest.
They find whale bones in the Sahara.
Oh no, Joe, those are 30 million years old, so stop talking about it.
It's amazing when you think about it.
Yeah. And so, as far as the climate change narrative, there could be a possibility that they don't want the evidence of a prehistoric civilization that was more advanced than what we ever thought to believe, that might corroborate some Christian narratives, and if nothing else, they don't want it to be brought into the discussion of modern day climate change. Because notice on the topic of climate change, they never mention natural stuff. They don't discuss the Milankovitch cycles, which consists of 3 variables, one of which is the Earth's precession, the other is the Earth's tilt, and the other is the distance from the Earth from the sun. All 3 of those variables are constantly changing every single day, although immeasurable day by day. They happen over tens of thousands of years. But each individual of those variables impact climate on Earth. For example, when I talk about the Green Sahara, they believe the most likely reason has to do with the Earth's precessional cycle. I'm like, well, wait a second. Where's this in the conversation of modern day climate change? If we're talking about us destroying the planet, I would just like an answer as far as where these 3 variables are in the conversation.
Did you see the Washington Post's very inconvenient data that they published about the temperature of Earth?
No, please tell me.
You can find the Washington Post climate study. They found that we're in a massive boom. If you go back X amount of 100,000 years and you look at like what's happening, it goes in cycles. That's what it looks like now.
Right.
Captures Earth's climate over the last 485 million years. Look at the dip we're in. And look how it's never static. It's down and up and down and up and down and up all throughout the history of the Earth, which is measurable. It's not to say that we don't have an impact on it. We definitely
pretty
do.
sharp increase.
But here's the thing. Even if but there's sharp increases in the past. Look at those back. Look at 390 million years ago. Look at that giant peak. That's fucking crazy. That's straight up and down. It's always happened. It's not like it's static and then industrial engineering comes along and then you see this big increase. Oh boy, what are we doing with the Earth? No, it's like even if we didn't do anything, we have no control over the temperature of the Earth. And what's really terrifying, Randall Carlson talks about this all the time, is global cooling. That's what's really terrifying. When global warming happens, oh no, you gotta move out of Malibu. You gonna be okay?
Hey, Jamie.
You gotta move to the places where it used to be cold and now it's warm because humans have always been nomadic. That's the whole reason why we're not in Africa anymore.
Fucking kill us all.
Right.
So
global cooling will kill everything. And we came. Randall talks about this. That we came very close at one point in human history. We came very close to losing the oxygen that's required to literally keep life.
Jamie, would you bring up my Ice Age or Ice folder? So I have an update for you from the last time I was on your podcast. Go over to the graph to one of the first slides in it. That one. Go right. Hang out right there for a second. So when I was on your show last time, Joe, I said something very specific where I said, I think this is my exact words. I think the data might indicate that cold is more often than it's hot. And do you know what happened after that? I was going to send this to you, but I held off because you've seen enough hit pieces. So there was a hit piece done on me by Media Matters, which was funded by George Soros, and their networking of Vox and others. They did this hit piece on me to say that Jimmy Corsetti was on Joe Rogan spreading climate change denial and inaccurate information. The only thing, bring that back up, Jamie, please. The only thing that I said wrong is that I said the data might indicate that the Earth is cold more often than hot. Excuse me, no. The data absolutely, definitively shows that Earth is cold more often than it's hot. And what you're looking at here is straight out of the Utah Geological Survey. It's prestigious. It's found at the top of Google. And what you're looking at here is data from the last 450,000 years, corroborating data taken from ice core samples from Antarctica as well as Greenland. And what it shows is that not only are we in the middle of a 3 million year old ice age, there's something called glacials and interglacials. Glacials are where it's cold and the glaciers grow. Interglacials are where things warm and glaciers recede. What you're seeing here is 4, arguably 5 interglacial periods over just the last 450,000 years. So never mind hundreds of millions of years ago. What it shows is that the periods of cooling last 7 to 9 times longer than interglacials, which are periods of warming. And here's what the fun part. Interglacials last anywhere from 10 to 30,000 years. And our warming started 11,600 years ago, which means that we're already in the window for potential catastrophe for things to start cooling again. So when I was on your show last time and I was mentioning Elon Musk talking about ice ages being a deep, deep rabbit hole, do you remember that? He was talking about it? Well, I know what he's talking about. It's this. It means that we're already in the window where things could start cooling again. And when it does, we're in a lot of trouble. I think, and I can't speak on his behalf, I gotta tell you, next time, can you just text him and ask him if he thinks that it's related to pole shifts? I need to tighten up my study on this because because let me tell you something. Let me share something right now that you've never heard on this show before. You hear everyone talking about cosmic impact hypothesis. You hear people talking about sun cycles. Not a lot of people have been on here talking about pole shifts. Let me give a quick shout out to Ben Davidson from Suspicious Observers. I recommend maybe you link up with him. Nobody has researched the topic of pole shifts and sun cycles as much as him. And he brought something to my attention I've never heard before. Jamie, the very first slide that you showed was of the Gothenburg excursion. So there was a partial pole flip right in the middle. See how it dates between 13,007 and 12,003? So the younger guy started 12,800 years ago. And it's right in the middle of that ballpark range. We already know it is established science that when geomagnetic pole excursions happen, it changes weather patterns on Earth as well as the ocean current. Jamie, if you want to Google, there's a space.com article titled that in 2025, some scientists are suggesting that the Earth's ocean currents may stop. Have you heard this? Okay. And nowhere in the articles did they mention anything about pole excursions. So people need to understand that we're already in the middle of a pole excursion, which is a partial pole flip, which means that things are shifting inside the Earth. It's also known that that can cause changes in ocean current. Now, most mainstream articles, let me just be fair and tell you what they'll say. They'll say that, oh, no, it's related to man-made climate change. We're changing the currents of the ocean. I don't believe that. But yeah, hit don't allow. Don't let him take your data. Look at this. Nowhere in this article did it explain why. But here's the thing. People need to understand that the number one thing that affects weather on Earth is, of course, the sun. The second thing is ocean currents. It's the reason why England is relatively temperate.
Go back to that chair.
It's the reason why England is relatively temperate is because the Gulf Stream flows up there and keeps it relatively warm.
The way it says it here, the Atlantic current could collapse soon, impacting the entire world for centuries to come, leading climate scientists warn. So just by saying climate scientists, you're already implying at least this is the result of climate change.
Right.
Which further fuels this agenda that man-made climate change is the cause of all of our woes.
Right.
It is a narrative that you're consistently hearing. And again, it's real clear someone's going to say something about this. This is not to dismiss pollution. This is not to dismiss our impact on the atmosphere of the Earth and what we're doing with coal plants and all the bullshit that we're doing. For sure, we're doing bad things. Also, if we weren't, we have no control over this thing.
Right.
This thing is constantly moving. And both of those things need to be looked at the same time. The problem is this whole narrative of climate science has been adopted by these same fucking people that want Twitter pronouns. It's the same people, it's the same sort of thing, and if you have anything to say about it, if you want to talk about a swastika being an ancient symbol, now you're a Nazi. Now you're a climate denier, you're a vaccine denier, you're this, you're that, you're a Holocaust denier. It's like the same kind of stupid shit. And unfortunately with this one is uniquely tied to money. This one is uniquely tied to green agendas and the enormous amount of funding that is going towards these green agendas and people that are profiting off of spreading this narrative. These philanthro-capitalists that are making hundreds of millions of dollars promoting this idea of climate change being our primary problem. And if you deny it, you're a science denier.
And the reason why you shouldn't listen to these people is because they're leaving out the key data involving Earth's historical climate data. They're not including all these other details. And so I think people need to look at pole shifts because it's very interesting in this alternative realm with people that are proponents of the cosmic impact hypothesis. You have Dr. August Schock with the sun cycles. You have other people talking about pole shifts. I think people should consider that all the above are correct, and let me explain why. When pole shifts happen, Earth's shields are diminished. We're in the middle of a pole shift right now. The Earth's shields are diminishing, and it's been happening since the 1800s. It's been accelerating over the last few decades. This is scientific data. The North Pole is shifting at like almost 40 miles a year, when it was half that just a decade ago. And when the Earth shields diminish, we are more susceptible to cosmic impacts because less.
40 miles a year?
Google it. This is real.
Wow.
It's happening.
I had no idea. I thought it was speeding.
Now, the mainstream will say, "Don't worry, it's still another 1,000 years away." I'm like, they actually can't prove that because we haven't been alive to document a pole shift. But what I'm trying to say is that we should consider the pole shift thing. Brother, ask Elon Musk his thoughts on this sometime.
Well, he actually just tweeted something about it recently.
What did he say?
He tweeted something about the magnetic poles.
Oh my God!
Yeah, he tweeted something about.
I think he actually retweeted the
core of the Earth.
What's his face? I forget his name, but you were just shouting.
Ben Davison?
Ben Davison. I'm pretty sure he retweeted Ben Davison.
Oh, we need to find that out if that's the case. Because here's the thing.
He tweets so much though; it takes so long to go through his tweets. I don't know.
He does it too much. It's less effective because I'm like, I miss stuff, and I follow him closely. Actually, there you go.
Yep.
Look at this.
Oh, it's a thin crust of solid rock, which a vast ball of molten rock, Earth's core, which generates most of our magnetic field, is 85% iron and moves independently from the surface plates, which is why the magnetic pole changes position.
I love Brian Winelli. If I'm saying his name right, we follow each other. He's a great guy. I think Elon Musk is giving a hint here because you remember how the Northern Lights were visible as far south as Mexico recently in the last few months?
That was right?
Right. But the reason why it's more visible now is because the Earth shields are diminishing. This isn't like from Bob's website. This is mainstream science. Again, Ben Davison has taught me a lot on this, and he was actually on with Alex Jones not long ago, and he really blew Alex Jones' mind. He vetted him, and so what I'm trying to say here is that like this is not being brought into the equation of man-made climate change at all.
Well, because of all the things we were talking about, the educators want to be the only ones that distribute the information, and they don't want to look at the full picture. They only want to look at this one thing for the greater good of all of us. It's better if you just get people to only focus on getting an electric car.
Yep. Right. Well, like I've always, ever since I started doing this stuff, I've had people that are like, "Hey man, you fact check scientists. We want you in the climate change debate." And I've always had the opinion of like, look, I'm talking about big old rocks and moving zero sum. If I'm wrong about that, nothing changes. If I'm wrong about climate change, I get a bunch of people. I feel a little like it's not your area. It's not my area of expertise, and there's too much skin in it. But when I did the debunking of Flip Dibble's debunking of Graham, the part about the metallurgy, I spoke with an ice core specialist. And now there ain't but a handful of these dudes on the planet. Literally just a handful.
That was a very important part of debunking.
Oh, thanks. I appreciate that.
You're the guy that blew the roof on that.
Yeah.
You're the guy that contacted firsthand.
Let's explain what it did.
Well, I spent an hour on a Zoom chat because what Flynn had said was that there was no proof of metallurgy in the ice. And of course there's no proof of it, but he said that we can prove definitively there was no metallurgy. And that's where it's like, well, no, because we look for levels of lead, and levels of lead, that graph you just showed with the interglacial period, lead follows that. Because when there's more dust on the ground, the reason they believe is there's more dust on the ground, more gets kicked up, more ends up in the glacier. But that's the same dirt that would be kicked up if they were digging for iron, right? So either way, you're going to end up with more lead in the glacier. So talked to this ice core specialist for an hour on Zoom, and I'm like, man, so flesh this out. Explain to me. So he explains to me how they determine whether or not lead's from an anthropogenic origin, if it's natural, and that's based on if there's an archaeological site that they can match the other isotopes here. He went through all the troubles. He even lamented having. He's got other people in his field that are hardcore anti-pseudoscience because they're climate change deniers are dealing with it. So he's like, some of these guys are just too zealous, overzealous with it. I get where you're coming from. Then I just put the video on, and Flint contacts the dude, and next thing you know, well, I didn't exactly say it there. He doesn't change what he says. He just kind of implies that I wasn't quite back. He doesn't get to pull anything. It makes it vague all of a sudden, and it's quite clear. He was pressured. I'm a fucking archaeologist. He's a climate scientist. Why do you care? Because they're all part of the same little Twitter keyboard warrior. Yeah, cult member. Yeah, and that right there changed my attitude on much. It changed my attitude on the whole global warming thing. I was like, that's probably accurate. And I was like, I don't fucking know. I'm going to dig into this something. I don't trust these sons of bitches anymore. I know that if somebody pressured him from upstairs, he would have crumpled on the back because he sure didn't quit.
So the issue is that it's not like there's one explanation that could conceivably have caused this massive cataclysm. There's probably a lot of variables. Just like there's always been. I mean, we always like to conveniently ignore supervolcanoes. When one of those blows, the whole world's fucked. The country's dead. Everyone's fucked.
You should consider the possibility that that's related to pole shifts as well. And I can give you a point. There's one that happened, I've heard you talk about before, the Toba super eruption.
Yeah.
Did you know that happened at the same time of a geomagnetic pole excursion?
Oh boy.
Bearing the seeds.
Well,
it
makes sense.
It does.
There's movement inside the Earth. A full pole shift is when they believe that the innermost portion of the molten within the Earth core shifts. A geomagnetic pole excursion is a partial pole flip, which they theorize is related to the outer portion of the mantle. The Earth's crust sits on top of molten everything. And when that shifts, it shifts our compasses, and it's not unreasonable to suggest that when something shifts inside the Earth, it would affect things on the surface. I touched on this in the last time I was on, but when it comes to earthquakes, as an example, some originate in the crust, which is like 28 miles at its thickest, I believe, or on average, and others originate in the molten outer portion of the mantle. Well, if something shifts inside the Earth, why wouldn't it cause issues on the surface, whether it be earthquakes or volcanic activity? And some volcanic activity involving supervolcanoes coincides with geomagnetic pole excursions. And so when I was on your show last time talking about pole shifts along with the ice ages, I was part of the same topic. Why is it that Media Matters, funded by George Soros, decided to do a hit piece on Jimmy Corsetti, the YouTuber? Brother, they came after me hard on this, which to be honest, I relished over. I was like, this is hilarious. I'm like,
well, they don't understand that it's actually good publicity.
It is, and it makes me feel like
not credible anymore.
No.
Right, and it makes me feel like I'm over the target, because what's that saying about you get the most flack when you're over it? So I'm like, it makes me think that I'm onto something, because nowhere in any of these climate change topics, as far as like the narratives on it, do they mention anything natural involving, whether it be pole shifts. They sure as hell don't bring up the Green Sahara. They don't bring anywhere into the equation. They don't bring up the scientific fact that the Earth was warmer 4,000 years ago. There's Nobel Prize laureates that have been speaking out about this. There's two of them. Dr. Clauser, and there's another gentleman, I'm going to draw a blank in the top of my head. But they've shared this data. This is scientific fact, and they're getting shunned and ridiculed for it.
Yeah, the problem is there's a consensus that's been politically accepted, and it's been talked about so much. It's a political talking point, and if they lose that political talking point, they lose a large percentage of their platform.
Oh yeah,
right. There's so many parts of the leftist platform that they need to have these narratives, and one of them is climate change, and that Donald Trump is a climate change denier. The right-wing people are climate change deniers.
Ergo science deniers, ergo racists.
It's very, 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 very stupid, and it's bad for all of us, because I think we all need to have an understanding of how delicate our environment is and how delicate life on Earth is, and that it is this constantly changing thing that has never been static. We know that. We know about the dinosaurs. We know about all these different things. We know about the Ice Age, but we don't truly have a comprehensive narrative that everyone accepts. It's become politicized.
Yeah.
And it's become politicized by the worst people because they're the cultists.
Yeah. They're the ones that they're not the only ones, but I'm a lot less political than a lot of people in this community. And I said it when COVID first started getting bad and you could see it on the internet. I was real quick to say, man, we're going to be fucking locked down for years, guys. And everybody's laughing at me, but it's like, it's a political football. Neither side is going to drop a square. We don't live in a society of political compromise anymore. We live in a society of give them an inch, they take a mile. Neither side is going to concede one fucking inch on this, and we're going to be dealing with the same argument 3 years from now. And lo and behold, we were dealing. And
that's what's crazy about this, is that data has become politicized. Science and data and knowledge has become politicized.
Over 80,000 papers were retracted last year. 80,000 scientific papers. Like 60% of them were medical. The top 10 most still cited papers that have been retracted are all medical. The medical community is fucked right now from COVID. It turned in on itself and just started. And if you look at their papers and stuff, it's insane. They are all at each other's throats in all kinds of different ways, still citing